Welcome, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and wow, it's Thursday night again, and I'm really excited to welcome back to McDuff Lives our two great correspondents, George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very, very much for both of you for making time once again on a Thursday night to be here with me and enjoy, which I really just always just enjoy our conversations so much. We have a kind of an open format, and I don't really know what you guys have on your minds, but I know it's going to be fun. So, any Professor Hamamoto, I think it's your turn to go first if you want to and open up a subject or two.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John, for inviting me back. George, it's good to see you again. I had a great time on the show yesterday, Wednesday, and I encourage all the listeners and the audience to jam up those phone lines because I really enjoy hearing what people are thinking. I get tired of hearing myself talk, and I gather a lot of information and energy and insight from people that do call. So make use of that feature. It's a very important one. Well, I wanted to open up. This is it's sort of a brainstorming type of question, a charrette type question, and I broached it before, and I want to explore it even more in depth now and into the future. And I think it's more relevant than ever because there was an announcement that Decode, who's one of the friends of Club Osprey in Team W, sent me a announcement from the office of guess who? First Lady Melania Trump. She created an office, says First Lady Melania Trump. So this is in keeping with my initial assessment. I guess it stems from an intuitive sense that she's going to play a very important role in the winning back of the American Republic with her office there. So in addition to that, I've been asking on occasion about this whole idea of zones, right? We first heard about the TAZ, the Temporary Autonomous Zone, out in Portland, right? Then I've mentioned DC. I've talked about the ritualistic functions of the ellipse where President Donald Trump held his gathering. And of course, we all know about the occult and metaphysical origins and layout of Washington, D.C. itself. And then, John, I'd like to ask you about this because you had a grasp, an understanding, or a knowledge of an individual by the name of Chuck Feeney, and you immediately associated with him with duty-free zones, or stores, rather. So what I'm seeing is that, whether it's the Vatican, the City of London, Washington, D.C., Tokyo, there's all these zones. There's these, I don't know, autonomous, sovereign, independent entities within nation states. And I think it's an important reality, not just a concept, but an important geopolitical reality that we need to discuss. We need to dig deeper into it because the reality is that as of today, and I've been thinking about it, I've been talking to one person in particular who gave me an incredible analysis, and it seems to hold water, but I want to throw it out here for discussion. She tells me that there are two presidents right now. One is the president that was elected duly by the American people, and the other one is the president of Washington, D.C., District of Columbia only. So what do you think, George and John, about autonomous zones, duty-free stores?
I have a layered response that might take a couple of minutes to that because it's something that comes up often on my channel, and people will mention what they call the Act of 1871. They say, John, what about the Act of 1871? And I really, I have to apologize. I haven't had much patience for it. It's something that, to me, appears to be driven by a desire on somebody's part to create the impression that our country has already been sold out, that it's already been, gutted, and the Constitution that we learned in 8th grade no longer really has any effect because it's been taken over and the U.S. is a corporation. And you see the thing with the fringe on the flags, right? And the
Mhm.
admiralty law, and there's people say, well, this is admiralty law. Well, oh, okay. First of all, the Supreme Court of the United States is still the ultimate authority as to what the law is in this country. And you can't show me a Supreme Court case that recognizes any of that. Okay, so you would think it would have come up since 1871 that at some point a Supreme Court case would have said, oh, yeah, you're right. The Congress turned DC into a corporation, and the US is really just works under the corporation now, and it's two different governments. And you would have seen a court case that said that. Secondly, if you go back and actually read the law, you'll find that it does not say what people want it to say. It's simply it's a definition for purposes of the reorganization of the District of Columbia, and it has a definition of the United States. And one of the definitions is I don't want to get the words wrong, but you could look it up yourself. But that if Congress has created a corporation, like for instance the shipping board, the congressional power to create a corporation which exists since the Panama Canal, that type of corporation is sometimes referred to as acting on behalf of the United States in legal pleadings and stuff like that. But there's no way that I could justify a legal pleading in which I was to say, hey, look at this law of 1871, and the United States is now a corporation operating under DC law. That is not to say that everything else that has been said about the occult nature of the way the streets are laid out, the existence of the Freemason at 17th Street, the entire Jesuit and Freemason combination that went into the formation of the streets themselves, as well as the culture and the educational system and everything of DC. All of that is true. And the effect of these kind of secret bodies behind the scenes, whether the Freemasons or the Catholic Church or the Jesuits, is profound. But let's not go so far as to say, kind of hand the game to them and say, oh, you know what, you're right, that you tricked us in 1871 and we're really not sovereign anymore. So you're right, Great Britain does own everything. No, it's not the case. And I don't know how that argument got so powerful, but all you have to do is get the law out, read it, and you'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my take on this, Doctor, thank you, John, for that erudite discussion. And I forgot about you taking me down to the Masonic halls in D.C. And, of course, we went on a charrette to the big one out on King Street in Alexandria, Virginia.
Yep.
But in my book, the new book I wrote, and it's out in color on paperback now, and I'm learning to be like Dr. Hamamoto. Always plug your books, right?
Okay.
1 minute past midnight, it talks about these autonomous zones, using them as areas for mustering military assets vitally needed in case of insurrection. And my central thesis is the January 6th thing was very much the flooding the zone with the word insurrection was to trigger the MAVNI. Thank you, Andy. You got a gold star. To trigger this insurrection, and these are autonomous zones. So you remember we had one in Minneapolis in the summer as Antifa was assembling. We had one in Seattle as Antifa was assembling. We had one in Portland as Antifa was mustering there. And then now we had one down on the border situation. So you see this, you just see this kind of assembling of sort of these stay behind armies, only they're staying behind in our neighborhoods now in case we insurrect. And so I very much believe this is the way that they get the money for the UN peacekeeping. They can invoke UN Article 5, attack against one, attack against all. So I can bring in the UN peacekeepers, the Kelly services, police departments, etc. And that's what we see happening in Washington, D.C. I'm back here now to go up there again to report on it again. But this concertina wire and the 11-foot fences and all the troops are still there through the end of the year, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, George, do you think that this resurrection of the Act of 1871 could be another example of a Q-style Fourth Army psyops put out there as a distraction?
Yeah, I think they definitely need to replace Q with something. And it's like, well, we got a whole bunch into the slaughter pen, 25 million into the sort of the virtual dossier slaughter pen that we can label all them as domestic terrorists. But now we need something else. And I do think this 25th Amendment, the amendment of the states and all that, you have to always have something. Go back to Lee Harvey Oswald. It was funny. I was reading today, talking with Wayne Madsen on my channel, and you had the Minutemen, same thing as the Proud Boys. You had that all the way back then, trying to entrap people and then trying to do the same thing with the Cuban students and so forth. These counterintelligence operations, they just love them.
I was reading about the Minutemen some time ago when I used to do a lot of reenactments, and one of the things that they said was the Sons of Liberty were they were the ones that would kind of go out in disguise and try to cause trouble for loyalists and all, but they're famous for singing very, very badly. So
yeah.
they go up to the door and start singing.
Yeah. But no, the Minutemen, that general that Lee Harvey Oswald took a shot at, General Walker, that Minutemen.
Oh, Walker. Oh, those guys.
Those guys. But yeah, this counterintelligence thing has been a part and parcel of the FBI really since I think Coover died. And they've taken everything and made it into a trap in a psyop. And, you have Cass Sunstein coming back, for crying out loud, with his wife, Samantha Power, who did all the unmaskings. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is George Orwell's 1984 nightmare. And he's ready to reprogram you. And AFC just gets on every day talking about how a snowstorm, blizzard in Texas is your fault for not believing in the Green New Deal. I mean, I don't know how you get there logically, but this is the kind of thing out of their mouth right now. And re-education camp.
Well, George, you mentioned Cass Sunstein, and he's in the mold of one of these second-rate scenario writers, screenwriters, sort of like Adam Schiff, because Cass Sunstein is associated with this famous paper of his. I don't know who he delivered it to, but it's entered the literature, and he calls this concept cognitive infiltration. That's his term. So he's back for a second act with his cognitive infiltration strategy.
And when
pardon me,
Buttigieg is your Secretary of Transportation, you think everybody's going to have an eclipse plane and everybody's going to, we're going to spray everywhere outside the green zones, just like Libya and Syria and Yemen and Sudan. So you just see everything like Doug Valentine said, everything they do over there comes back over here, and that's the real blowback.
Doug will be on the show on Saturday, the 27th of February. That's a week from Saturday at 11 a.m. Just since you mentioned his name and his incredible work, what a fabulous connection he is. Mm-hmm. I don't want to not honor the idea of these zones, Professor, because DC has become a zone. Whether it was intended to or not, you now have this entire administration as well as the courts that are all lined up on the side of the Pelosi and the deep state folks. So it is, in a sense, a zone of its own where I don't, like this Roger Stone trial, for goodness sakes. What can you expect from or trying to that whole impeachment thing with Patrick Leahy pretending to be dispassionate. You know, the whole place is now a zone, as you say, and we talk about the city of London as a financial capital, and Washington as being the capital of the military side of the trio, the Vatican, the London, and Washington. And it looks to me, as I said last week, that we are now owned by the banks that to whom we owe so much money, to the extent that they're going to be able to use us to pursue their military ventures, just like they've been doing since the 50s with the CIA, covert operations. I don't see any way that we can break free from the control of these banks. George, Goldman Sachs, Kushner, we haven't talked about them in a while. Maybe bring us up to date on your thinking about what is that? Is there any difference? I mean, you still got Goldman Sachs in a whole lot of the administration positions, right?
Well, these aren't the good Mossad you're looking for, so we can move on. No, I'm just kidding. I have a soft spot in my heart for Jared, so people don't like that. And his 555 6th Avenue, or I think it's 6th Avenue building. I think he's out of that now. But yeah, John, I definitely do think I've watched your shows with Harley Schlanger and talking about how the banks are always on the smart money side of these conflicts. No matter whether it's civil unrest or whether it's the War of 1812, and they have the Oconus lures to waylay the messenger for the results of Waterloo and all that. The Rothschilds are always going to be the smart money. I agree. And we're on our show, Belt and Road Show, we're kind of following the smart money of the Rothschild Energy Group, energy partners, along with Joe Biden's CEFC in China. But speaking of China and the foremost expert on servitors, these folks who sold out their country and sold out our country to these elites, Dr. Hamamoto having written that, I just wanted to show everybody his website on his YouTube channel, because I don't think people know that he has one. Is that okay, John, if I do that real quick?
Of course. Yeah.
I'm going to just do the handheld camera here. And Doctor, if you want to talk a little bit about your thumbnails.
Well, I know we were entering into a dark winter, so I started doing twice weekly YouTube programs starting on Christmas Eve of 2020, and I've been doing them ever since then. Just sort of articulating this whole idea, this framework, this new epistemology, this lens that I'm looking through, called a New World Order theory. And today, for example, I talked about the continuity between the work of Dr. Hans Asperger, an Austrian pediatrician, who made his bones on researching the syndrome that was named after him, Asperger's. And I drew a direct connection between him back under the Third Reich and today the people at MIT and other sterling research institutions who have extended that to talk about the re-engineering of the human brain, the neurological system, as per Dr. Hans Asperger. So what I'm doing is just like as George does, connecting these different data points from unexpected sources, and then showing how consistent they are, how they form a network themselves, a neuronal network, a system. And in taking people twice a week through this exercise, I'm hoping to inculcate this type of methodology to the citizen researchers that animate this whole movement. It's a movement now. It's a bona fide movement of Club Osprey and Team W, citizen researchers, citizen journalists. So that's, in a nutshell, is what I'm doing.
And what I like about it is you have all those books, and you're always talking about books. And John, I want to pivot now to books about your dad. This book I've been reading They just destroyed this guy named Karloff or Carlo.
Yeah.
And I think the real K is what your dad said it was Kissinger.
Well, my dad didn't say it, but I think I said it. When I first read it, I read that book. I said, K. I mean, come on, how hard is it to figure out who K is? But Kissinger was the one that was telling Angleton to find the mole. Kissinger was the mole, for Christ's sake.
Right. Well, we'll find out, because your dad obviously worked with Golanowski, and Golanowski did say it was Kissinger. So we'll get there.
Right.
But
Exactly.
here's a new book that I got today, which is The Secret History of the CIA.
I have that.
Yeah, nice big thick one. And we're talking about Nosenko, and I've had Bill Taylor on my show, our show at Belton Road, and I had Wayne Madsen on today. And, I said, now Wayne, we know AE, like AE Wireless or AE Hero or AE whatever was meant Soviet defector, and the Soviets coming, those were the cryptonyms for the Soviets. But now, how about Oswald at GP Floor? What does GP Floor mean? And then started into, well, the fake defector program, where we were feeding them fake defectors. And he said, yeah, they ran a few, and Oswald was the most successful fake defector. I said, you think he was under FBI handling? He goes, oh, absolutely. So you have to watch that. And then I said, well, could GP be the 2-letter code for fake defectors? And anyway, he pulled out a State Department memo, and this guy named Montreal, it looks like the name Montreal, but it's IEUIL, kind of one of those French names. And it talked about what they call the Navy Code 30 program for fake defectors out of the Office of Naval Intelligence. And I thought, man, this sounds a lot like McDuff, So we'll see, but we're kind of edging our way forward to looking into these programs that the State Department was running to do fake defectors into the Soviet Union. And it could be that this Oswald's wife, Marina, was a reverse fake defector, because her uncle was a colonel in the KGB. So this is getting good now in the story, and I just wanted to kind of give you the update from these new books we got.
Speaking of books, may I just briefly return to Agent K, as in Kissinger?
Mm-hmm.
There's, when I was growing up, let me just preface this. When I was growing up, the John Birch Society was anathema in my household. Nonetheless, over the past 20 years or so, I've been reading some of their older literature, and it holds water. So I'm wondering if some of this material here that I was reading about, that was published by, quote unquote, the John Birch Society, had not been unfairly stigmatized in a similar way that the LaRouche organization was ostracized by the left. Anyway, I'm not going to try to address that question. I just wanted to refer both of you in the larger Club Osprey research community to a very important book by an individual. I just pulled it up now. It's Gary, and I'll email it to Andy if he wants to put it up there real quick. Gary Allen, and he's famous for the classic John Birch Society book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which has been in print ever since then. This is a really nice monograph, and I think it's still in print. It was originally published in 1976, and the title is Kissinger. I give him the Germanic pronunciation. Kissinger, The Secret Side of the Secretary of State by Gary Allen. And it has 10 chapters, really packed with information. And George, it fits right into the mole hunt story. The mole hunt premise as Agent K being Henry Kissinger.
Is this the Gary Allen that you're speaking of? Did he have a radio show, this gentleman?
I don't know what he looks like, but he did have a, like a short wave or AM radio show for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So none dare.
This to Andy right now.
Yeah, none dare call it conspiracy. I don't know if that's it or not, but
that's him. That's the Gary Allen.
So
the point is here: don't discount anything based on read it all. whatever baggage it seems to have, it's to our benefit to understand this. In this case, I think Gary Allen was right. And this is way back in 1976, pre-internet, pre-research committees, pre-conspiracy theory is being normalized, I guess you can call it. So I tip my hat to Gary Allen, at least in this case.
Sounds interesting. I don't know the book. Boy, you can get a hardcover copy for only $768.57.
Really?
Yeah.
See, that's another reason, ladies and gentlemen, to buy these books, because you know what? Like George's, for example, snap them up while you can, because they become collector's item. They're worth hundreds of dollars, especially if they're printed upside down by accident, like that famous postage stamp. I have this one book on quote unquote AIDS by Myers. I forgot, Michael Myers, which I got at the regular list price of $15. And I looked on Amazon recently, and it's going for like $800.
Yeah, I saw a lot of my color McDuffs going for like 50 and 60 bucks. And so
there you go.
The new one past 1 minute past midnight, the autographed copies are already making a round out there. So I'll check this out. You know, I like buying the books on Kindle, doing John OLoughlin fast read, and go from search term to search term and do a speed read a couple of times. I might read the book 5 or 6 times with different keywords, skimming it like that. And I really find you get a better holistic understanding than if you read it from beginning to end. I get tired if I read a book, open it up and I fall asleep after about a chapter. Mm-hmm. But this is a fun channel for that reason alone, is it's good book talk with all these books.
Absolutely. They're indispensable research.
I'd like to update a little bit, since we were talking about McDuff, my dad. I realized that I had kind of foreshortened his career in the Navy by about a year. When I spoke to you the other day, George, we were talking about MacArthur's landings on New Guinea, and how that was the island hopping and the beginning of the island hopping, and how interesting it is that they're using, of course, the landing craft, the LSTs, the Higgins boats, and this all developed by General Krulak, the Marine colonel at the time, who later became my dad's boss as the Saxa. So all of that's going on in New Guinea, as my dad is a junior officer on the Nashville, but that beginning of that campaign was in 1943, and my dad arrives in June of 1943, and so he's been with MacArthur for a year already by the time of these events on New Guinea. So it gives me a whole new perspective, and I pulled out my book here on the biography of Brute Krulak here by Robert Coram, and I'm realizing the depth of which the ship had a crew of 500 people, the Nashville, and my dad was one of the officers, and General MacArthur was an officer, and they were on the same ship for months and months and months. MacArthur would come and go, but I've just learned that he had a particular just love for the Nashville and its crew. And there is a whole exhibit on the USS Nashville down in Norfolk, George, at the MacArthur Memorial, which I never knew, but I just learned, and I'm going to go down there and check it out, because they've got all of the USS Nashville stuff. So my point is that I'm starting to realize that I didn't want to look to find and get disappointed. So I didn't really look to see if my dad was really in a position to be that close to MacArthur. But now I'm seeing that absolutely he was. He was on the same ship doing campaign after campaign after campaign for over a year. So that's a big progress in my own understanding of who my dad was.
Let me make sure because I watched your show where you said in this kind of cartwheel down New Guinea, that in the Fogelkop, where they had the rich oil, where they didn't have any sulfur content, and this is
right.
Rockefeller secreted this for 40 years until Suharto could be installed and so forth. Are you saying that he was involved in these campaigns as well?
All of them, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, and I need to flesh this out, but just because I know you're excited about this, Krulak is like the guy that comes up with the idea of these front opening landing craft. He stole it from the Japanese. He'd seen the Japanese do something like it, and he came up with the idea. And then they got with this Higgins guy, and they built all of these thousands of them down in Louisiana, New Orleans, and then they used them in the landings at Normandy in June of 44. So by the time of Leyte in October of 44, Krulak was no longer with MacArthur down in New Guinea. He had left. So who's left behind to be the expert on how to run the landing ships? That's what I'm thinking has happened, is that Krulak was the guy, but that my father must have been kind of learning how to do it when Krulak was there. And then after Krulak goes off with the 3rd Marines to do other work, going north instead of west with MacArthur, they split up. Who was left to coordinate and organize the landing craft? That's where I think my dad's role probably was. So that's how he learned that's why he got a reputation by the time of the Leyte Gulf landings to be the guy that would be standing on the bridge next to MacArthur with the big binoculars watching it unfold. That's very exciting to me.
Yeah, it's great. I love this.
John, there's another historical point of interest here that complements your father's story. Am I correct? Was your father at Midway as well? The Battle of Midway? Oh, okay.
He was. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's another prominent Irish American who was a commissioned naval officer, and his name is Rear Admiral John Ford. But we know him better as the director of the Searchers, She Wore Yellow, all these great Westerns featuring John Wayne. His real name was Sean O'Faney, and he changed his name because of, the discrimination against people of Irish background.
Yeah.
But he was in Midway, and he was, I think, part of the U.S. Signal Corps at the time. And I wonder if your father, while you were growing up, ever mentioned the fact of meeting any film directors or cameramen or reporters, because this is when photojournalism and film journalism was really going through its modern iteration, I guess. And did he mention meeting any celebrities or Hollywood people?
No. The only celebrity he ever recounted meeting was he was in New York in Boston going to the Boston Pops, and he was there early, and a limousine pulled up, and it was he's on the curb, and the limousine pulls up, and the door opens, and this guy starts kind of falling out of the back seat of the limousine and gets up and tries to walk across the street, and it's Arthur Fiedler.
That's a good one.
Mr. Fiedler, are you all right? No, my dad didn't. We didn't really have much of a chance, to get stories like that from him. I'm sure he had those kind of stories. He knew lots and lots of people, but we didn't have a chance to learn about that stuff, sadly.
Well, John Ford is a recipient of the Purple Heart for the wounds that he got on the Battle of Midway, 42. So he was on the front lines. This is a far cry from these Hollywood types who are always promoting some sort of social justice cause. The people back then who were in Hollywood, they were veterans of the war. The ones that we grew up with in the 1950s. They had been in the Marines or the Navy. Rock Hudson was in the Navy. Pardon me?
Jimmy Stewart, almost every single one of them.
Clark Gable was in the Air Force and so forth. Yeah, I remember John Ford did How Green Is My Valley.
Great movie.
Just these are tremendous movies. And in my quest going to New Orleans in 2 weeks, I'm pulling out a lot of photos and so forth, like John, we did last month with all the archives. And this one is of David Ferry. And he's teaching navigation, as you can see, to, unfortunately, a young, unsuspecting young man like these Lee Harvey Oswald types. And you can just see that these stories that John has, put so much effort into, and meeting Ed Haslam and meeting Wayne Madsen and meeting Judith Vary Baker. Although I don't think you've met Judith Vary Baker yet. We're going to get to go to all these places. So I'm looking forward to going to like the Higgins Boat Factory and so forth, so we can kind of collect a lot more string, if you will, for the next McDuff. I think I'm going to call it McDuff's Files, but I don't know yet. I want to get more juice before going out there. But this is a fun channel for just that reason. We keep finding new things that open up the real history.
Mm-hmm. Well, I found some documents. They're scans that are archived. They're not on the bookshelves anymore. They used to be at the university libraries, but they've been taken off and they've been scanned. And through these, I guess, inferring from the publication dates and the places where they're published. Get this, ladies and gentlemen. It appears that New Orleans was really ground zero for the Knights Templar of America. It's real. It's a real entity. And what we're seeing even today in 2021, of course, we see all these different seemingly sovereign entities or nationalities, groups that are, including George de Mohrenschildt, for example. That's another good example. White Russians, right? Any number of groups, Mexican nationals that Yoichi Shimatsu is talking about, the U.S. border. That's why these zones and borders are so interesting, because when the rubber hits the road, there's all these different groups that are operating on U.S. sovereign soil that ostensibly is governed by a constitution and a Bill of Rights. And then all the major constitutional cases are supposedly being argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. But in actual practice, we have, I won't say a multitude, but a number of contending semi-sovereign entities, political, economic, geopolitical entities, going back way, into the early Republican period of the United States, like the Knights Templar. I gave Tyrone, I sent it, and you can check that because he's from Louisiana. I gave Tyrone a scan of that. I hope he brings it down to the charrette to share it, because that adds another very important layer of nuance and complexity to this research project that I think will yield even more insight into the events of January 6, 2021, when once more the American Republic was under attack by foreign powers. It's not the first time, right? We know this. And the problem is that the mainstream historians, like we saw yesterday, George, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. at Harvard, they don't really talk about the crypto historical realities of the United States of America. And to me, that's where the action is.
Yeah, you mentioned Schlesinger, and he was the key source for the book, David Talbot's Devil's Chessboard. And so I love Schlesinger because he's the one guy on the inside of the Kennedy thing that's not a part of the secret team, that's giving the information out to everyone to really tell the story. And you can see Fletcher Prouty kind of catching those passes and trying to make it a bigger story. And then finally we get JFK as a blockbuster a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. Another good example of that is John's future guest very soon, Douglas Valentine. There were people on the inside giving him credible information who were not part of the secret team. And I'm mentioning this is because why cannot that happen in 2021? There has to be people out there who want to share this type of information, citizen journalists, so that we can get a more precise picture of what's going on behind the scenes, history being made behind our back as it's been expressed. And once we get a better fix on that, I think we'll be better able to respond accordingly. So no leads whatsoever should be ignored or dismissed. I want to see everything, no matter how far-fetched or woo it sounds.
Yeah, some of the Knights Templar stuff. I was going back and I was looking at some of these Russian defectors, and there's this guy named Orlov, and he looks just, and of course Pete Buttigieg has all these brothers and sisters and cousins that have all written all these histories of the Knights Templar.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody more connected to all this stuff than Alan Dulles with the Knights of Malta and so forth here in Washington. And so I looked at this Orlov guy, and he looks just like Buttigieg. I'm like, this is scary. So, like, were all these white Russians are now we dealing with all their kids now in these positions of power now? Is that what's happening?
It's just like the Ira Levin novel. I don't know. I think Ira Levin must have been an OSS or something. The guy that wrote Rosemary's Baby. But he also wrote the great book, The Voice from Brazil. We're dealing with the voice from Brazil, second, third, multi-generational clones.
I really sometimes feel like we are, Milner's Kindergarten is
right.
Really that, Milner's Kindergarten. So
this is the dividing line between the Republic and the Empire. Are we going to follow the lead of these people that say, basically their message is, hey, you don't know how to govern yourselves. You need to have experts, and we're the experts, and we'll take care of that for you. I was just reading a very good essay about James B. Conant, the president of Harvard during the 40s when my dad was a student there, and also a man who became the commissioner of Germany after the war was over for a couple of years, and he has been an important person in so many ways. His specialty was chemical warfare, and he started out in the World War I era producing chemical munitions down here in the Washington area where it became American University. Well, you can think somebody that would be willing to create a chemical weapon that would, just spray it and everybody dies. That's a pretty dark way to look at life, but it was the majority view of these elite intellectuals, from 1880 to now almost, and maybe even still most of them now. They just don't think that that humans are able to govern themselves. And that's the basic problem we have, is that you and we say, I have a constitution. I have the right to be heard. I want to have my free speech. I want to have my Second Amendment. I want all of my amendments. I want everything it says that I'm entitled to. I want to be that free American that can, exercise his rights liberally. Mm-hmm. Well, why can't I? Because, it's Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth. You don't know how to protect America. You cannot handle it. And that mentality is fixed in these elite minds to the point where they have come up with this idea, which is, again, this comes from my reading of this essay about James B. Conant, of how did their eugenics ideas, how did that survive World War II when eugenics became the tagged with the Nazism, and they still wanted to do their eugenics program, but they had to call it something else, and it migrates amazingly into the environmental movement. One of the things that they were doing was, instead of following the Constitution and the Declaration's idea that every child can get an education and better themselves and have a better life and contribute to society, as long as you give them a fair chance and give them a basic education. That's Jefferson, right? Well, they had to find out a way to keep discriminating in favor of their own progeny and their own, elite status. So now we have, as you were just saying, and this is what triggered this, you have a group of Mexican Americans, you have a group of Korean Americans, you have a group of all of these hyphenated Americans, and you have then you have your secret societies, you have your Skull and Bones, you have your Templars, You have your Southern Rite Freemasons. You have all of these other ones that, the Knights of St. Pythias or the Odd Fellows, or there's a million of them, but they all have their own agenda. And it is not being a Republican. It's not being somebody that will participate on a level playing field with you and me and everyone else, because that's why they have the secret societies. That's why they do it, because they don't trust us and they want to have their own structures behind the scenes to control us. And now it has indeed, as you say, George, the bankers' dictatorship is what really is looming here, because these bankers control things through these various things, whether it's a church, an army, NATO, the Atlantic Council, or the Knights Templars. End of rant.
Well, I very much agree that bioweapons are a banker's weapon. If you think about it, you don't destroy any of the infrastructure that I hold the mortgages on. If I could just get rid of the people and then move new people in, it's the banker's weapon of choice. And to that end, I did a little 2-minute today about how in the COVID, everyone was expecting, the only statement we'd ever had about the COVID in Wuhan was by the government, the foreign minister, saying it was the U.S. athletes. I say it was a small contingent, a diplomatic contingent. But anyway, that was the only comment we've ever had. But we just sent all the people over there from WHO, and they've just completed 2 months of study and then the 2 weeks intensive study. And here's what they came up with, John. They came up with, we don't know. All hypotheses are still on the table, right? All hypotheses are still on the table, okay? And now the people who are doing the bankers' weapons, the Bill Gateses of the world, they're denying the fact that they were a part of Event 201. This is their event, John. This is their event. I can prove it. I can show you. There's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation right there. There are all the people who participated. There's Avril Haines from the old, there's Gary Gao from the Chinese government. Here are all the people that participated in Event 201. This is the same day that we had the breakout, supposedly, in China. Now people are saying it happened earlier. And there is where all of the bioweapons testing was with the Corona 911, the 5 different bioweapons. If it falls on this side of the red line, on that side of the watershed of the Himalayas, of Mount Everest or K2, it goes to the river basin right here. And that river is the Yangtze River. And if you follow that river down, there you go through Chongqing, the old headquarters of Chiang Kai-shek in mainland China, the Chinese nationalists. You keep going down there and you end up in Wuhan. And then the other confluence of the other great Yellow River also meets there in Wuhan, making it the natural point, the natural collection point for food chain type viruses. And I had Wayne Madsen on today, and he was saying, because of Trump and Trump's the climate policy, that old ice caps are freezing, and there's these ancient viruses that are being released, and they're coming down the Yangtze, and they're coming down the Yellow River. I said, well, couldn't that also account for Imran spraying all these different bioweapons, the four or five different ones 10 years ago, for the last 10 years? Wouldn't that be more likely than the Neanderthal viruses? And he said, well, Occam's razor. And I said, I think Occam's razor favors me, that it would be something more recent. Plus, since it has the 5 HIV inserts in there. So this is the fun part about having all these different speakers, John, come in and we talk about it and have an open forum. The First Amendment still not criminalized. I just want to say thanks for letting me share this kind of piece of information on your show. Cool. And Wayne Madsen is golden, and I don't always agree with him, but I know that he knows what he's talking about. And I love him. He was kind enough to give me a couple of hours of interview in which I was happy to hear him confirm our theory that the 68,000 files that my father was given by Hoover to sort through probably were
as we suspect, applications for visas from people from the collaborationist armies, the Eastern European and Polish, and the ones that would have been, really some nasty guys that my dad had to sort through. So great journalist, and thanks, George, for your work in putting us together, because I wouldn't have met him without you, of course.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Hamamoto has brought us, Yoichi Shimatsu, and
I know, that's so awesome.
yeah, the great Ron Schofield. And can you talk a little bit about Yoichi, Doctor, with this whole thing?
Yeah, he's really hot on the trail of the California connection. And I'm going to be supplying him some of my own research material so that he can complete the puzzle. He's going to be publishing a blockbuster piece, an investigative piece, without giving away too much, that connects the Harris administration, the current one that was elected by the Washington, D.C. elite, but doesn't rule the rest of the republic, or not the rest, but the real American republic. And he is going to connect Kamala Harris, Willie Brown, all those people, including individuals who I knew in San Francisco, the public defender, city of county of San Francisco, Jeff Adachi, who died under mysterious circumstances, Mayor Ed Lee of San Francisco, who died of mysterious circumstances, and State Senator Leland Yee, who was rolled up for gun running to the Philippines. He's going to be putting all this together in the context. Again, we're talking about borders. We're talking about zones of the Mexican mafia, who are the embedded stay behind Gladio-style muscle to bring in fentanyl opioids from places like Iran, China, and other parts of the world, reminiscent of the German plans, as was revealed in the Zimmerman telegram, to invade and occupy the United States from its southern border. This is around the time of World War I, just to kind of give you a historical marker. And these characters are for real. They're serious. And this is one of the reasons why the president of Washington, D.C., Joseph Biden, has thrown open the gates again to the southern border, because he is in the pocket of these various foreign entities and governments, and is beholden to them, to put it mildly. In addition to this, and of course, I'm interested in the occultic aspect of it. This is their religion. It's called Santa Muerte, right? This helps account for the extreme violence and torture and victimage of even children and women as a ritualistic sacrifice. And of course, it has the Catholic Church in Mexico reeling, except for the fact that it might have been the Society of Jesus themselves they're about as devious enough to create something like this to fight against, right? That's how my mind operates. So that's what Yoichi's working on, and it's exciting material, and it's going to really place the Harris administration of Washington, D.C. Notice how I keep distinguishing D.C. from the rest of America. It's going to put the Harris administration to its proper context very early in its 4-year run, if it lasts that long. And that's a big if.
I would like to comment on your comments on Mexico and the Catholic Church and the Jesuits, that the incredible difference between what traditional Catholicism is, and it still exists in Mexico, as I understand it, a very, very individualistic, prayer-oriented, devout religion that is really not a threat to anybody, except for, when you go to the higher machinations of people over history. But on an individual level, it's fine. It's a very nice religion with a lot of ceremonies and candles and everything like that. But the machinations that you mentioned of the Jesuits has been going on for centuries. And yes, they will create something exactly like you just described. They certainly will. And I have to mention that today, when I was reading from Graham Lowry's book, How the Nation Was Won, a wonderful book about the positive vision of America that started with the Puritans back in the 1620s. Well, he suggests that this really hard-nosed Calvinistic Presbyterianism, in which the Dulles brothers are famously, talking about, well, I'm a Calvinist, that justifies them to treat the rest of the world as if it, was all derelict, and they weren't. The idea of, if you're not chosen, if you're not already saved, then you're going to go to hell anyway. So what's the difference if I speed your journey a little bit? That Dulles attitude. This suggestion back in the 1680s and 90s that it was the Jesuits that inserted that crazy fundamental hard ass Calvinism into the Presbyterian Church in the first place. And that's consistent with the Presbyterians coming right from Scotland, where the Freemasons come from, and that all goes back again to the similar idea of a source from the hidden hand behind the hidden hand that often turns out to be, unfortunately, the Jesuits. So to distinguish the Jesuits from the run-of-the-mill Catholics that still exist in many places in the world, especially in Mexico.
Absolutely. We have to remind ourselves that the Society of Jesus started out and has remained primarily a military order, not a religious or ecclesiastical order.
Yeah, I'm going to be rewriting my book about Carter Page, not rewriting or updating it, about La Jolla Carter Page, because he had an office working for Omar Awan. And I believe very much, him being a very strong Jesuit, that he was a part of this this spraying campaign that happened in Libya and Syria and in Egypt as well. And so we're looking into his whole Navy intel background on the shelf of Africa. And this idea of these bioweapons as being God's viruses, the Erasmus lab, where you get this humanism, it's not good enough just to be Calvinist. We're the chosen ones because our chemistry is better, sort of like the Huxt and the BASF. We're the chosen ones because we're the great chemists, and we're going to actually create. And we were born into this soup of the plagues, the bubonic plagues. That's why when we came to America, all the Indians died. That shows our superiority. It wasn't because they had no immunity. It's just God's will, right? And I do think there is that thread, John, of this kind of Templar sword, God wielding his Templar sword with these bioweapons. I really believe that. Like you said, Dr. Hamamoto, on our show, it doesn't matter what we think. It's what they think. It's how they think about their weapons and their bioagents or whatever. And we see these people out in Dugway Arsenal, out in Utah, thinking these strange thoughts about how they're the chosen ones. This chosen one's thinking is very dangerous, especially when you combine it with bioweapons.
Yeah. And I sent both of you gentlemen that long PDF about chemical and biological weapons. It's a handbook just to give, an idea of the extensiveness of the inventory and all the tools at the disposal of, and I agree with your assessment. It has, strangely and ironically enough, theological roots, very strong ones that run very deeply into American soil and British soil, part of the Anglo-American alliance. I don't see that that exterminationist impulse is strong coming from other parts of the world. Maybe China is trying to compete on that level, which is horrible. It's just the idea that we're creating an enemy on the same level, on the same at the same level of technical sophistication, and we, the little people, the munchkins of the world, are going to be the ones that get rolled up for. But of course, that's part of the plan, right? The whole ethnic cleansing means not just one particular group; it means all ethnicities except for the Erasmanian, the great theologian, except for the elect, the predestined. Right? The people who have been chosen, handpicked, selected for survival into the future.
I'll leave it there, but I think that you said it best. That's going to be the diplomatic mission that we're going to be watching, the Erasmus lab going to Wuhan to try to save a bioweapons experiment by Mr. Gates. got out of control. And I think that's going to unlock a little bit of history for us, but we're not there yet, but I'm working on it.
Great.
June 6th is coming apart. The COVID thing is getting more and more dissected every day. I watch on Twitter so many scientists are working on this effort, and George's reporting is right at the forefront of all of these efforts. This Osprey Team W thing really works, and it's forcing them to change their policies. It's forcing them to change their activities. And it's forcing the mainstream media to actually take some notice now and then. And once again, George Webb has been able to get them to look. You got to look pull the curtain. You got to look behind the curtain there, Toto.
Well, Bill Gates wouldn't be denying the fact that he paid for Event 201 unless it's his bioweapons program. And I know we're at the end of the show. But this goes back a long way with the University of Washington, and this goes back to Vindman, like you had mentioned, Dr. Hamamoto, down there at the boat at Tacoma. It's a special, secluded program off to the side for special forces. This is the dumping Operation Rainbow in Korea. It's Vietnam. It's all of the Iraq and Afghanistan. It's been going on, and it's been going all through the Arab Spring. And Yugoslavia. So anywhere it seems like George de Mohrenschildt discovered uranium or rich, very pure crude oil, seems to be the place where they get sprayed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, more will be revealed as we keep exploring and trying to uncover the reality of our world today, and try to get rid of all of these creeps that seem to be in control right now. Thank you, Professor Hamamoto. Thank you, George Webb. Thanks, everyone in the chat. And we'll be back again next week for Thirsty Trio here at McDuff Lives. Good night, everyone.
Doctor, thanks.
Great. Good night, everyone.